You noticed it this morning, not during a hard moment, not during one of the nights when everything rushes in and the weight of this connection is impossible to ignore. This happened quietly. This happened in the middle of something ordinary. A cup of tea, the light coming through a window, a few seconds of stillness that felt, for a change, like actual stillness and not just exhaustion pretending to be peace. And then it happened. Your chest tightened, not grief. Not the familiar ache that you have learned to carry the way other people carry keys in their pockets. Just always there. Just part of the weight you move through your day with. Something different. Something that arrived the way a warning arrives, or the way the air changes right before something shifts in a way you cannot undo. You were close to something, and your body knew it before you did. That is what this video is about, not about him. Not about what he is doing or not doing, or whether he is thinking about you or running or somewhere in between. This is about what is happening inside you right now, in this specific window of your journey, when you are finally, genuinely, for the first time in a long time, close to the edge of letting go. And your body is doing something you did not expect. It is tightening. It is holding on. It is doing the one thing that does not make logical sense, given how long you have been doing the work, given how much you have understood, given how clearly you can see that the holding is what has been keeping you in the loop. If your chest has been doing something strange lately, something you cannot explain, something that arrives not in the hard moments but in the quiet ones, leave a like and subscribe so you stay connected. Drop "My body knows the way" in the comments. Because what is happening in your body right now is not a setback. It is one of the most important signals your system has ever sent you. And before we go any further, there is something I want to put directly in your hands. Because if you are at the place this script is describing, you are not at a general stage. You are at a personal threshold, and general content reaches a ceiling at a personal threshold. What you actually need right now is a map built specifically for you, not for twin flames in general. For your specific birth chart, your specific connection, your specific moment in this journey. That is what a twin flame union personal reading delivers. Your name, your date of birth, your exact time of birth, your place and country of birth. Those 4 pieces of information become the foundation of a personal audio reading and a detailed written PDF report delivered to your inbox. What the universe is currently orchestrating between you and him. Where you actually are in your journey, what karmic patterns have been running underneath the surface, what your soul contract with your twin truly means, and what your next phase actually looks like from a cosmic perspective. This is not a sun sign forecast. It is a reckoning built from your chart alone. If you are at the threshold, you deserve the specific map. Now, the tightening. Here is what nobody prepares you for. The letting go is not supposed to feel like relief. Not at first. Not in the body. The mind can arrive at release before the body does. The mind can follow the logic, can understand that something has run its course, can recognize that continuing to hold what cannot be held is the thing that has been costing you the most. The mind can make the case for freedom with genuine eloquence. It can lay out the reasons. It can feel in the thinking layer like the decision has already been made. And then the chest tightens, and you wonder if the decision was real. This is the moment most people misread, because the tightening feels like resistance. It feels like the body saying no. Like something deeper than the mind is overruling the logical conclusion and pulling back toward the familiar, toward the connection, toward the one thing you have been trying to release. And because it feels like resistance, it gets interpreted as evidence. Evidence that you are not ready. Evidence that the letting go is not true yet. Evidence that something in you is still holding on for a reason. But the tightening is not resistance. It is a threshold response. And understanding the difference between those two things will change everything about how you move through this week. From a nervous system perspective, and specifically from what polyvagal theory shows us about the relationship between the body and significant emotional transitions, The tightening that arrives when you approach the edge of genuine release is not the body pulling back from freedom. It is the body doing exactly what it is designed to do when it approaches the edge of something unknown. Because the nervous system, whatever the mind has decided, does not distinguish between the unknown dangerous and the unknown good. It registers unknown as threshold, and threshold activates a very specific physiological response. The chest tightens because you are about to cross into a version of yourself that has never existed before. Stephen Porges, whose work on polyvagal theory changed how we understand the relationship between the autonomic nervous system and emotional experience, made a discovery that is directly relevant to what you are experiencing right now. The nervous system operates through 3 states, not 2. Most people understand fight or flight versus rest and digest, the accelerator versus the brake, activation versus calm. But Porges identified a 3rd state, an older state, a state that predates both the social engagement system and the fight or flight response in evolutionary terms. He called it the dorsal vagal state. And what it does, what it is designed to do when the nervous system encounters a situation that is too large, too unfamiliar, too outside the known range of experience, is collapse. Go still, hold the breath. Tighten around the center of the body to protect the vital organs while the system figures out whether it is safe to move. The chest tightening you are experiencing right now is a mild version of that ancient response. Not because you are in danger, but because genuine release, real release, the kind that actually changes your interior landscape rather than just rearranging the furniture of your grief, is one of the largest things a nervous system can encounter. It is the edge of a self it does not know yet. And the unknown is processed at the autonomic level before the conscious mind ever gets involved. Before you decide what the tightening means, your system has already detected the edge of the known world. And it is doing the only thing it knows how to do with edges. It is gripping. This is important to understand because if you misread the grip as evidence that you are not ready, you will pull back from the threshold you have spent months or years working toward. You will interpret a nervous system response as spiritual truth and use it to stay in a loop that your mind has already recognized as complete. The tightening is not the body telling you the connection is not over. The tightening is the body standing at the edge of a version of you that the connection was always trying to create. Here is something that does not get enough attention in twin flame content. Late separation, specifically the phase of late separation where the divine feminine has done enough genuine inner work that she can feel the possibility of actual release, is the phase that requires the most from her nervous system. Not the early stages, not the acute grief of the first weeks or months, not the confusion and the intensity and the constant checking for signs that characterized mid-separation. Late separation, the specific threshold where she can almost touch the other side, is where the body gets the hardest. Because in early and mid-separation, the nervous system had a clear assignment: survive the loss, manage the activation, find a way to function. The task was defined. The system knew what it was doing, even in its most dysregulated states. Pain with a clear cause is tolerable in a way that is almost difficult to explain to someone who has not experienced it. The system knows what it is carrying. It knows what produced the ache. It knows what would relieve it. And so it organizes itself around the known, even when the known is painful. Late separation removes the clear assignment. The cause is still present, but the response to it has changed. She is no longer organizing around the hope of his return in the same way. She is no longer managing the acute wave of loss. She is in a quieter, stranger place. A place where she can almost see what it would feel like to exist without this connection at the center of her architecture. And that visibility, that glimpse of a self that does not have the connection as its gravitational center, is the thing her nervous system does not know what to do with. Because it is not grief, and it is not relief, and it is not hope. It is something that does not have a clean name. Researchers who study the neuroscience of attachment and loss, particularly work coming out of the field of interpersonal neurobiology, that was developed and articulated most clearly by Daniel Siegel, use the phrase integration to describe what happens when the nervous system is trying to bring together what has been known with what is becoming known. When two previously separate neural maps, the map of the self that has been in this connection and the map of the self that exists without it, are being asked to exist simultaneously, the result is not smooth or comfortable. It is turbulent. It feels like the chest tightening at a quiet moment on an ordinary morning. He feels it, not because he is consciously monitoring your internal state, not because there is some mystical telepathic system transmitting real-time updates from your nervous system to his. The mechanism is more specific than that, and it is worth understanding precisely because you may be reading his recent behavior through the wrong lens. When the divine feminine and a genuine twin flame connection approaches the edge of actual release, the change in her energetic field is detectable by his system in a way that nothing else in the journey has produced. Not her grief, not her anger, not her determined healing, not even the most well-performed version of her moving forward. Those signals, however intense, carried within them the underlying frequency of someone who still had him at the center, someone who is doing everything in reference to him, even when the reference was explicitly about releasing him. The signal his system picks up when she approaches genuine release is different in quality from anything it has registered before. It carries, for the first time, the frequency of absence. Not the absence of the connection, the absence of her orientation toward him as the organizing center of her interior world. And that is a different signal entirely. His system has been calibrated, whether he admits it or not, whether he even knows it consciously, to her orientation toward him. The same way any system calibrates to a gravitational field that has been consistently present. Her orientation toward him, even in separation, even in anger, even in the most exhausted versions of her healing, was part of the gravitational landscape his nervous system was orienting within. When that orientation begins to genuinely shift, he registers it as a change in the field before he registers it as anything else. Polyvagal theory describes something called neuroception, the process by which the nervous system scans the environment for signs of safety, danger, and life threat below the level of conscious awareness. Before you consciously perceive a change in your environment, your nervous system has already assessed it. Before you know something is different, your body has already decided how to orient. Neuroception operates through cues, not arguments, through signals, not explanations. The shift in her field as she approaches genuine release sends a neuroceptive cue to his system that produces something he will not have the language to explain. An urgency without an obvious source. A restlessness that attaches itself to thoughts of her without being invited. A sense that something is changing that he cannot locate precisely. A pull in a direction he has spent considerable energy not moving in. He does not know what is producing it. He knows something is producing it. And that knowing, operating below the level of his defenses, is exactly what the journey has been building toward. It is not him. This is important. This is possibly the most important thing in this entire video. When the chest tightens as she approaches release, the thing she is releasing is not the love. The love is not the problem. The love was never the problem. The love was always the part of this that was real and right and correctly placed, even when everything else was complicated or painful or unclear. The love was the truth inside the difficulty. What she is releasing, what the nervous system is actually processing as it stands at the edge and tightens around the center, is the structure she built around the love. The architecture of waiting. The identity she constructed, gradually, without fully deciding to, as the person who was in this connection, as the person who was this kind of love, as the person who had been touched by something rare and was organized around the memory and the hope of it returning. That identity was not a cage she chose. It was a home she grew into. And the nervous system does not distinguish between releasing a cage and releasing a home. Both feel like losing somewhere to live. Peter Levine, in his work on somatic experiencing, made a distinction that is directly relevant here. He differentiated between survival responses that have completed their function and survival responses that are still running because the system does not know the original threat has passed. The body holds on not because holding on is serving it, but because it was never told, at the level of sensation, that the reason for holding on had changed. The identity she built around this connection is not still running because she is weak or unhealed or spiritually immature. It is still running because nobody has sent the signal, at the somatic level, that it is complete, that it served its purpose, that what it was protecting, the real and rare truth of what she felt and felt accurately, does not require the structure anymore. The truth is intact. The structure can come down. The tightening is the structure recognizing that it is about to come down. And structures always tighten before they release. This is not metaphor. In the body, in actual tissue, in the connective tissue and the musculature that holds the shape of held experience, release is preceded by a brief intensification of the holding pattern. The body gathers itself before it lets go. The system concentrates before it completes. The chest tightens right before the breath finds its way all the way down. Before we go further, there is something practical that belongs in your hands. Because you are at a stage of this journey where the difference between what is actually changing in you and what feels like it is changing is significant. And without a way to document the real movement, the real shifts, it becomes nearly impossible to see what is actually happening over time. The mind cannot hold all of it. The memory cannot be trusted at the emotional level. What felt enormous 3 months ago gets absorbed into the ongoing experience of the journey and loses its clarity. The Twin Flame Journey Tracker and Progress Workbook is a 39-page system built for exactly this. 8 stages of the Twin Flame Journey tracked month by month, so you know precisely where you are and can see the movement over time. A synchronicity log that stops the 11:11 moments and the unexpected signs from dissolving into the river of experience you cannot fully remember. A daily self-love checklist that keeps you as the center of your own attention on the days when everything in you wants to make him the center. Weekly reflections for spotting the patterns you would otherwise miss entirely. Monthly reviews that let you see your transformation in black and white, so that when the chest tightens on a quiet morning and you wonder if you have actually moved at all, you have evidence. Real documented evidence, not a feeling, a record. If you've been doing this journey without tracking it, you're doing it without the map that shows you where you have been. The link is below. There is a concept in polyvagal and trauma-informed work called the window of tolerance. Developed through the work of Dan Siegel and applied extensively in trauma therapy, it describes the zone within which the nervous system can remain present, engaged, and capable of processing experience without either flooding into hyperarousal or shutting down into hyperarousal. Inside the window, you can feel without being overwhelmed. You can think without dissociating. You can hold the complexity of something without the system needing to collapse it into a simpler survival response. Late separation, and specifically the threshold of genuine release, exists right at the edge of the window. Not outside it, not past the edge, right at it. And the reason the chest tightens is that the nervous system is doing something incredibly sophisticated. It is allowing her to approach the edge of the window without tipping over it. It is maintaining just enough activation to stay present with what is enormous, just enough regulation to not dissociate from it. Just enough hold to not let the experience overwhelm the system before it can be processed. The tightening is the window holding. This is not the body malfunctioning. It is the body performing with extraordinary precision. It is the system doing exactly what an optimally functioning nervous system does at the edge of a significant transition. It is holding enough to maintain coherence while simultaneously beginning the process of release. The problem is that when we do not understand this, we interpret the tightening as evidence that we have not arrived at the threshold yet. We use the grip as proof that the release is not real. We decide that if we were genuinely ready to let go, it would feel more like relief and less like the strange, quiet, physical alarm sounding in the middle of an ordinary morning. But relief comes after the threshold, not at it. At the threshold, the body grips. And the grip, understood correctly, is not a reason to turn back. It is the last signal before the door opens. So what do you do with this? Not what do you do with him. What do you do with this? With the chest tightening on a quiet morning. With the signal that is not grief, and not hope, and not the familiar ache, and not the performed peace, and not quite anything you have a name for yet. You breathe into it, not past it, not through it in the sense of pushing through something that is resisting you. Into it. The way water goes into a crack. The way sound goes into a room that is already full of something else. You bring the breath to the exact location of the tightening, and you let the breath and the tightening occupy the same space without either of them having to win. From a nervous system perspective, this is not poetic instruction. It is physiological intervention. The breath is the one autonomic function that operates in both directions, that can be run by the involuntary system or taken into conscious control. When you bring a slow, full breath to the site of activation, specifically to the chest when the chest is tightening, you are sending a signal through the vagus nerve that the system registers as a cue of safety. Not a story about safety, not a thought about safety. An actual neuroceptive cue arriving through the breath that tells the system it does not have to collapse at the edge of the unknown. It can open instead. The difference between collapsing at the threshold and opening at the threshold is one breath. One full, honest, into the tightening breath that does not try to fix what it finds there, because what it finds there is not a problem. What it finds there is the last shape of what you have been carrying, the final configuration of the structure that was built when the structure was necessary, the form of a holding pattern that is about to become something it has never been before. You are not failing to let go. You are in the moment right before you do. The chest tightening is the last breath of the thing that is leaving, and the reason it tightens so specifically. The reason it is not just a vague general feeling, but a precise physical sensation in that exact location is that the chest is where she has kept the realist version of this love. Not the performed love, not the hopeful love. Not the love she could explain to someone who would understand. The love she never performed for anyone. The one that was just there, always there in the center of her chest, in the place that does not have a name in the medical literature because it is not a diagnosis. It is the place where the soul keeps what it knows is true. And what it knows is true is not leaving. What is leaving is the suffering that formed around it, the waiting, the organizing. Unconscious architecture of a self that has been built in reference to a connection that is not yet in its final form. That architecture has been protective, it has been functional. It has served the version of her that needed to be held together by something while the real thing was still in process. And now, because she has done enough real work, because the inner structure is genuinely stronger than the outer structure, because she no longer needs the connection to be the load-bearing wall of her interior, the system can let the protective architecture come down, and it tightens right before it does. This is the moment of the journey that nobody fully prepares you for because it is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a spiritual download or a meaningful synchronicity or a vivid dream or a message from him that changes everything. It arrives on a quiet morning with a cup of tea and a chest that tightens for no obvious reason. And what you do in that moment, whether you breathe into it or pull back from it, whether you interpret the tightening as resistance or as threshold, whether you treat the grip as proof that you are not ready or as the last signal before the door opens, will determine more about the actual trajectory of this connection than anything he does or does not do from his side. Because what the universe has been waiting for is not him to move. It has been waiting for her to arrive at this exact threshold, and stand in it, and breathe, and discover that the body already knows what the mind has been working so hard to understand. The tightening is not the body saying stay, it is the body saying you are here. You have actually arrived. And everything that happens next begins from this specific breath, in this specific morning, at this specific edge of the self you have been becoming, through everything this connection has asked of you. This was always the destination, not union, not the moment he comes back, not the resolution of the external story that has been running in the background of your life for longer than you ever expected it to run. This moment. This version of you who can stand at the edge of letting go without falling apart. This is who the connection came to create, and your chest knows it. And the breath going all the way down is you saying yes? There is something else worth naming about what he is experiencing right now as she stands at this threshold. His window of tolerance for this connection has never been wider than it is at this moment. And that might sound counterintuitive, because you might expect that as she genuinely releases, his capacity to engage would shrink, that less orientation from her would mean less activation in him, that the withdrawal of her gravitational field from his life would simply result in a quieter interior for him. But the nervous system does not work that way. When a strong and consistent signal is removed from a system that has been calibrated to it, the system does not simply register the absence and adjust. It enters what polyvagal researchers describe as a state of heightened neuroceptive searching. The system increases its scanning because the signal it has been orienting around is no longer present in its familiar form. Like a room that has had the same sound in it for so long that the absence of the sound becomes louder than the sound ever was. His system has been calibrated to her orientation, to her reaching, in whatever form that reached him, to the quality of her field as it consistently included him in its center. When that begins to genuinely shift, when the reaching stops not because she is managing it, but because something has actually reorganized, his system does not get quieter. It gets louder, more alert, more oriented toward the direction of the change. This is why the divine masculine often becomes more present, more reaching, more activated precisely in the window when the divine feminine is closest to the edge of genuine release. It is not a coincidence. It is not the universe testing her. It is the direct physiological consequence of a neuroceptive system detecting the loss of a signal it has been unconsciously depending on. He cannot explain it. He might not even be willing to acknowledge it, but the restlessness is real. The pull is real. The awareness that something in the field between them has changed is real, even if his language for it is minimal, and his ability to act on it is still limited by the same defenses that have been running throughout this entire separation. There is something specific about the window between the tightening and the release that is worth spending time in, because most of the narrative around twin flame release treats it as a single moment, a decision. A morning you wake up and something is simply different and you know the grip is finally gone. And for some people and some journeys, it does happen with that sudden clarity. But for most divine feminines, particularly those in late separation who have done the real and sustained interior work, the release is more like a tide going out than a switch being flipped. The tightening this morning is not the first tightening. It is probably not the last. What changes is not the presence of the tightening, but her relationship to it, the meaning she gives it, whether she uses the grip as evidence that she has not arrived, or whether she understands it as the specific sensation of arriving. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, whose work on grief gave us the foundational map of how humans move through loss, was clear about something that often gets simplified in the popular summary of her work. The stages of grief are not linear. They are not a progression through which a person moves once and arrives at acceptance and stays there. They are recurring. They overlap. They circle back. A person can be in genuine acceptance one morning and in deep bargaining the next afternoon. This does not mean the acceptance was not real. It means grief is a living process, not a completed one. Late separation grief, specifically the grief of releasing the structure built around a connection that is still energetically alive, operates in exactly this way. She does not arrive at release and stay there the first time her body allows her to approach the edge. She arrives. She tightens. She breathes. She approaches the edge again. She tightens again. She breathes again. And each time, the grip is slightly less absolute. Each time, the window between the tightening and the breath is slightly shorter. Each time, the nervous system requires slightly less activation to hold the threshold before it can soften. This is not failure. This is how the body releases what it has held for a long time. Not all at once, in tides. And the tide that is moving through her right now, on this specific morning, in this specific week, is not a small one. What is being released is not a single layer of grief or a single piece of the structure. What is being released, in the place where the chest tightens, is the deepest version of the waiting, the one that has been running below every conscious layer of the healing, the one that did not show up in the journaling because it was too foundational to be a thought, the one that did not resolve through the meditation because it was too old to be reached by the breath in the usual 5 or 10 or 20 minutes. This waiting was laid down in the first days of recognizing him, in the first moment of knowing, in the initial shock of encountering something so fundamentally recognizable that the nervous system could not process it as ordinary encounter and instead filed it under the category of home. And home is the hardest category to release, not because home is necessary, but because the nervous system learned to locate itself by it, to use the feeling of home as the reference point from which everything else was navigated. When the reference point changes, every calculation the system has been making has to be recalibrated. Every interior navigation that has been using the connection as its north has to find a new north. The chest tightens because the compass is being reset, and the new north is her, not him coming back, not the external resolution of the journey, not the reunion that the romantic narrative of twin flames has been promising. Her own interior, her own sense of self as a complete and navigable place, her own capacity to be home to herself. That is what is being established as the new orienting point. And the nervous system, calibrating to something genuinely new, does exactly what it always does at the edge of the unknown. It tightens, it grips, it holds. And then, when the breath finds it, when the awareness meets it without trying to fix it or explain it or make it mean something other than what it is, it releases. Slowly, in tides, with the specific relief of something that was always going to find its way to this exact shore.